Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Jay Hill. I'm a solutions architect at Lucidworks. And today I'm going to be showing you how you can use Fusion AI to improve your user search experience by identifying queries that are not returning results, even though the documents your users would find useful may actually be in your search index. Or in some cases, you might actually be getting results, but they're pretty bad, which frustrates everybody. So I'll show you how Fusion AI can identify these underperforming queries, but not only that, how it's able to rewrite these queries on the fly into queries that will give your end user satisfying results. So a little bit about me. I started at Lucidworks back in the early days of the company. We now have over 300 employees, but back when I started, I was actually employee number 16. And I started working at Search in 2004 with Lucene. For those of you who are not familiar with Lucene, it was created back in late 90s by Doug Cutting, who also created Hadoop and Avro and Nutch and a few other things. He's done a lot of work in information retrieval. And Lucene is at the core of Solr. And Solr, of course, is one of the core components of Fusion. So today I'll be spending about half an hour talking about query rewriting, which is a way to use our machine learning tools to improve your user search experience on your site. I'll introduce you to the concept of query rewriting and how we make use of that in Fusion. I'll also demonstrate some examples of why this is important for any search application. We'll have a Q&A box on your screen, so feel free to enter questions as they come up. We'll do a brief Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So, put those questions in the Q&A box. So we don't know what we don't know. Without some way to identify these underperforming queries, we're essentially flying blind. What we want to find out is this. Are your users entering search queries and getting zero results or bad results when the documents they're looking for are actually right there in your index? But for some reason, the queries are not being formed correctly. Now, maybe they're misspelled, maybe there are number dimensions, such as typing in a quote symbol for inches, but your catalog actually spells out inches, or typing an X for by, like in 2x4. Maybe there are brand names that are not common or not identified. This can be extremely frustrating for anyone that's searching. I mean, we've all been there. On e-com sites, potential customers will immediately go to your customer's site. I mean, I do this all the time. My attention span is pretty much zero. Expectations of any search experience these days are get it to me immediately, and it better be exactly what I need. And I'm starting to think that Google can read my mind. It anticipates things so quickly. So what we need is what we at Lucidworks call head-tail analysis. Fusion captures everything that your users are doing, including the queries they're entering, the results they've clicked on, where they're coming from, and so on. We call these action signals, and they're a very important part of how Fusion AI does its thing. Since we have that raw signal data, we can analyze all those queries, and we know which ones are getting results and which ones are not getting results or they're getting bad results. We aggregate all that data, and we analyze it, and we identify those queries we're not happy with, or the ones we're happy with, we call head queries. The ones we're not happy with, or they get zero results, we call tail queries. And, it would be great if we could actually do something with that information, and, guess what? We can. So this is where query rewriting comes in. And we can use machine learning jobs, which with Fusion are out of the box, to identify why our tail queries might be failing or underperforming, and implement ways to turn them into head queries. So how do we do that? There are 4 machine learning tools or jobs running in Fusion that are central to head-tail analysis and query rewriting. There is a head-tail analysis job. Now, this job goes out and identifies the head and tail queries. It does some analysis on why a query might not have been successful. And it stores that analysis in a separate Solr collection, so it can be used throughout the process to help improve these queries. We use it at different stages along along the way, and I'll demonstrate some of that as we go along. There's a spell correction job, and this one works on the main Solr collection and identifies misspellings. It's more comprehensive than something like a simple edit distance analysis, and it integrates with other jobs that are in this whole flow. There's a phrase detection job. This one does exactly what it sounds like. It goes out and it finds and stores examples of phrases. And a synonym detection job. Now, this one is a bit different than a typical dictionary-based synonym feature that you might be familiar with. In this case, machine learning algorithms are used to identify words that appear to be synonymous based on their common proximity to surrounding words in a document. So if it finds a word foo surrounded by a bunch of words and the word bar is surrounded by that same bunch of words or similar, the synonym job determines that foo and bar must be synonyms. So it's in context with your own corpus. It's not just a dictionary-based thing. It's got some flexibility and some intelligence built into that. So on the analytics side, we have a component within Fusion Server we call App Insights. And this is where we can see reporting on queries, including charts showing tail queries and their suggested rewritings and possible reasons they were unsuccessful, number of unique queries, how many queries lead to 0 results, and so on. So we'll take a look at Insights dashboard a little bit later. So let's take a look at some query rewriting in action here. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be showing you one of our parts of one of our demos. This is an enterprise search demo that we've built using some of the information on our own company site. And we're going to take a look at some examples of misspellings, synonyms, and how phrase detection, how all these things can be used to rewrite your tail queries as head queries. For the purpose of the demo, we've created 2 pages, and one that doesn't. Also note that we've created a debug banner, which you'll see, just to show what actions are being taken when a query is rewritten. In Fusion, we use query pipelines, which some of you may be familiar with if you're working with Fusion. These pipelines receive incoming queries and process them through a series of stages, and the stages can perform a lot of different functions, mostly related to relevance tuning. So for our demo, the page labeled as search here, you can see me hovering over, is a simple, well, it's a pipeline, except it's missing one stage, which actually does the query rewriting. And then you'll see over here, right next to it, I have this search with query rewrite that actually puts these queries through a pipeline that's going to do the rewriting. And a little bit later, we'll look in the Fusion admin console, and we're going to see how these things are different because of the stages that do the query rewriting. So first thing we'll do is look at a simple example of a misspelling. Let me put something in here. Let's say index pipeline. So this should normally be 2 words, but let's just say any user assumes it's only 1 word, and they're going to just go ahead and barrel through here, even though they've got a suggested spelling right there, but we know how that goes. So they hit this, and not surprisingly, they get 0 results. So we're going to go through ahead here and go now over to the search with query results, and we're going to see that as we put this through the other query pipeline, we've triggered the spell correction, and we've replaced this. So we've had an incoming query that's the one that I've entered here without the space in between. And then as that goes through the pipeline, it actually gets transformed and rewritten with the space in there. So it's important to note, too, that spell correction by itself, you could do that, sure, without query rewriting. But integrating with the other stages allows us to kind of chain these together and with the different actions that are happening, like the phrase detection. And it's also a little bit smarter than the traditional edit distance approach that you might use. So let's take a look here at the Fusion admin console to see where some of these query rewriting tools are managed. So I mentioned earlier that there are 3 jobs that run to support the query rewriting. And there's a misspelling detection, there's the phrase detection, the synonym detection. You'll notice here, though, we've got five panels up here that we can access. The business rules is actually it's kind of connected to these, but it's also different, so it really doesn't factor into what we're going to be talking about today. So I'll be showing some of these other four and what they do, because they're directly related to the machine learning jobs and Fusion AI. Business rules are more of a thing that your business users can do to go in there and do promotions and things like that. So if we look at the misspelling detection here, you can see that as the misspelling detection job has gone through, it's identified some of these, and as it finds these, it'll also, you notice over here, it's got a confidence level. And what's happening here is it's going through, and it's got some way as an algorithm, like under the hood, that's saying it's somewhat confident or it's totally confident. Now, if these come in and it meets that threshold, it's going to come in right away as approved. If it's not completely certain, it might come in and it will not automatically push that up to an approved level. It's going to let somebody on your search team come through and either approve or deny that. And when they do, this publish button will be active. When you hit that, it's going to put that so it's actually live on your site. And all these things go into a collection. Everything we do in Fusion is captured in a Solr collection. So we can actually, we can actively access these different collections and make use of those. And so these go into a query rewrite staging collection before they get published. And once you approve these and publish them out, they go into the final query rewrite selection where we're going to access those. And also note that there is a way to add things manually if you do have things that haven't been captured. So let's go back over to our demo page and take a look at a synonym. So in this case, we're like I said, we're on the Lucidworks internal enterprise search. And for whatever reason, let's say somebody is looking for our CEO, Mr. Will Hayes, and they look for head guy. Don't ask me why. But for obvious reasons, because this is just going to be a keyword search, they're getting things that match guy. They're eventually going to get head, whatever down here. But because this has become a synonym, we're going to find out that head guy is a synonym for CEO. And now this has triggered the synonym part of our query rewrite, and it's replaced head guy with Will Hayes. And now we're seeing some results that we're happy with. There's Will. I want to show you another example on my local machine here, where just to talk a little bit about these confidence levels that I mentioned. So in this case, what I've done is I've set up some synonym detection, but I've set a really low threshold for the approval. So I mentioned earlier the example where foo and bar might be detected as synonyms. And they're synonyms because the synonym detection has said, okay, here's foo, and there are words that I found around it, and when I see bar, I've also found words around it. Now, normally you would have a fairly high threshold, so these would be, you'd have a pretty high confidence level. We've seen, let's say there's, I'm just making up a number here, but there's 20 terms, and those terms are all around foo, those same terms are all around bar. But in this case, like I said, I've tweaked this so it's got a really low threshold, maybe 4 or 5, 3 or 4, whatever it was. And so you're getting a lot of false positives in here. And things like solo and headphone, maybe there was some product that had these two somewhere near them. So you can see these confidence levels are really, really low. But this just gives you an example of how the synonym detection will work. And the great thing about this is it does find things in context. So if you don't have a dictionary, you can't think of everything. So you may have this large corpus of data, especially in enterprise search. It's also very, very useful in e-com or knowledge management. But in enterprise search, if you've got millions of documents, this is really useful. You're not going to think of everything, maybe all your synonyms. If you find new ones, you're going to go and you're going to manually add them. Somebody's got to curate all this stuff. So this is pretty handy in that it's going to find things that might not have been readily apparent that are going to surface for your users. But Let me go back to my demo page, which I've moved away from. And now we'll show a little an example here of where a phrase detection is used to do some query rewriting. So another, one of the other jobs. So I'm going to use an example here of early binding as my query. So here, because I'm really just doing a keyword search from the two terms, you're seeing results here where I see binding, earlier. Not that great. Now, it's going to do some implicit phrase matching. Maybe if you set up your parameters, those of you that know Solr, you can set things up in the eThisMax handler, and you can do some of this. But you can still have cases where maybe this term is just so prevalent in this document that the scoring is going to override your implicit phrase queries. But with a query rewriting, you're going to see here that once it's gone through, and we've gone through the phrase detection, now what it's done, it's still keeping my simple search on the two terms, but it's gone ahead and said, I found this, and I'm going to make this an explicit phrase query, and I'm going to go ahead and boost this by 5. So now, no matter what the scoring might have been, if I've got examples of the early binding, that's going to get boosted a little bit higher. And if we look at that here in our phrase detection dashboard, you can see, well, that's actually dropped off. Let me see. That might be in my underperforming query rewriting. So this is cycled off. We actually put a timer on our demo so that things reset. So, but you can see here where this is the example of where things do get rewritten. Here's some examples where it's identified this, and it's gone through, it's done some phrase detection, some boosting. You can see incoming queries that have been rewritten here. So this is where they go into that query rewrite collection that I mentioned, and the tail query comes in, it comes out as a head query. And I'll show later, well, actually, let's get to it right now. I'll show you how these actually take action in the different pipelines. So we'll go through here. We'll look at the 2 different query pipelines. So we got a lot of pipelines that are active in the demo, but the 2 ones we're interested in here are the main pipeline, which this is the one where my normal searches were going in the examples I've shown. And you can see here there's a lot of different pipelines doing different things. We're doing some security trimming, some different relevancy tweaking on signals. But in the one with the query rewrite, I've got actually an additional staging or a stage here. And here's where the query rewriting happens. And note this is all out of the box. We haven't tweaked anything here. And it's also important to note all the ML jobs are running. So if I just activate this text stagger, and those machine learning jobs have had enough time to run and they've accumulated data into that rewrite staging and then eventually the rewrite collection. Here's where we're going to apply all these different things that we've seen. So I'm getting my spell correction, phrase boosting. You can see here what they're going to be doing. So that action is going to happen there. And that's where we see the output that we saw in the different demos. So I want to show you one more thing that Fusion offers, which is we have our tool, if you're not familiar with it, that we call App Insights. And App Insights does a lot of different things. It will give you dashboards that show what users are doing. You can track user sessions. You can track, I mentioned signals. You can get a look into what things are being clicked on. Signals also do things, just as a brief aside, where it'll crowdsource what users are doing. And if users are doing searches, but they're all finding the 5th result more relevant than the first result, we're going to capture those signals as clicks, and we're going to boost those higher up in the results. And we can use App Insights to get a window into what's happening. But what we're interested in today for our talk is the head-tail analysis. So here's where we can get a visual. This one's actually, let's see, what am I looking at? again, it's reset itself. But in this case, it's got a limited amount of head and tail queries. But you'll see here, it'll be a much larger plot in many cases. Let me see if the other one, I have another one active with a little bit better example. Got a couple different demos active. Yeah, this one shows a little bit better example. So this is an example of where I've had a lot of queries coming in. And I mentioned in the slides that there's that the Pareto principle, which says most of my small amount of my queries are giving me a greater amount of my results. That's my tip of the iceberg, and here's my underwater part of the iceberg. But we also print out some statistics on why, what's happening. We're seeing the total number of unique queries, calculations on how many of these are leading to clicks, which ones are failing, the type of traffic and a percentage of that traffic is getting clicks, the length of the number of tokens in the queries. Sometimes that's useful to know if users are typing in simple two-term queries, or if they're doing much longer queries, maybe that's something you need to look at so you can apply things like query intent. And then we show the tail reasons. In this example, we've got very few. I think in the other example, we might have some more. So you can see here we're identifying some of the reasons these are tail queries. Maybe it's a color that wasn't picked up, brands that weren't identified, misspellings, the numbers I mentioned where maybe it's either part of a catalog, part number, or something in an e-commerce product. And you can see here some examples of the tail query and what the suggested rewriting is. And this is actually applied if the confidence level is high enough. And the reason code and some other details about that. So you get a little bit of a window into what these things are doing inside your analytics tools. So, oops. So I'm going to go back just to show one more example in my slides of putting it all together. And back to that text tagger, you can see we'll show how more than one of these is applied as the query goes through. So you've got an incoming query where someone has misspelled iPad, but they want to find a black iPad, a car dock for an iPad. So the first thing we're going to do through this text tagger is do that misspelling correction where we're going to say, we're going to fix that IDPA to iPad. And also we're going to do something where we're going to identify that as a head query. So because that is a head query, we've seen it before, we're going to give it a little bit of a boost for iPad. Phrase detection is going to identify car dock. We've seen that a lot throughout our corpus. So we're going to give that the boost of 10. And we see the color black, so we're going to apply that, the field color, and we're going to say we're looking for black. But hold on a minute there. How do we get to that? You say, I didn't cover anything like that. How do we know that color is a field in our index, and how do we know that black is actually color without anything applied intelligence-wise to determine that? So the final thing I'll talk about is these custom dictionaries. So you're going to have a lot of examples where things unique to your data, you may want to make use of that and identify these things. And this is a huge benefit, because if you do have things, well, in an e-commerce example, this is an obvious one here. You've got brands like HP and Samsung and Sony. Colors are going to be a big factor. But you may have, maybe you've got an application where you've got birds, let's say. So you may have a bird that's robin. You may have a bird that's blue jay. You can put those in instead of brand. You can say bird, and you can identify those. You may have bands. Maybe it's a music website. So you've got Joy Division, you've got Beatles, you've got Mass Driver. You can enter all these things. It's a simple CSV file, and it's something you upload into as a blob into our blob section in the system part of Fusion. And you don't have to do anything beyond that. As long as you upload it to the right section in that blob upload, the ML tools are going to look at that, and as they do the query rewriting, they're going to use that. And as you saw in my example here, because they picked up color and they picked up black as a color, they pick that up and they're going to use that. And that's a huge boost for your rewriting. That's something that you might not have got otherwise. It's going to treat black as just another term, and it's just not going to be as useful as if you can apply that to the field itself and say, okay, color black. I'm looking for a black iPad card out. So this incoming query comes in, and the outgoing query is much, much smarter, much more likely to get some actual results.
Hey, sorry for the interruption. Jay, do you mind stop sharing your screen and go back to the slides?
Oh, sorry about that. Okay. All right, is that better?
We're still seeing the presentation manager.
Okay. All right. Not good. Sorry about that, folks. Screen share. Let me find that here. Oh, my goodness. So, get rid of some of this stuff.
Looks good. We're back to the slides.
Okay, excellent. Sorry about that, everyone. So let me look at a few questions that we've captured here. So, is the feature part of Fusion out of box, or is it something extra? And how much configuration do I have to do? It is out of box. It's part of the Fusion AI product. So we've got Fusion Server and Fusion AI. And these three machine learning jobs are tuned right out of box. You do not have to do any particular configuration. I've been asked before, if you want to tweak these, can you do that? The answer is yes and no. You can. The out-of-box jobs you can't get into the tune, but you can do your own custom jobs to if you want to do your own spell correction, you can do that. But so you can replace them in effect with your own if you want to, but in general, I wouldn't think you would actually need to. You mentioned that ML jobs must run in a certain order. Why is that? That's because if you didn't run the spell correction first, you would have misspellings going through, and your phrase detection might not be nearly as good. You definitely want to spell correction first, because everything downstream of that, if you're passing through misspelled correction or misspelled things that haven't been corrected, that's not going to be good. Does the custom dictionary support phrases for keyword? Yes, absolutely it does. Let's see. After a tail query is seen and rewritten, do you save that and reuse it, or does it go through the same steps if the same query is seen again? It is saved, and that was something I showed in the one screen where once it's passed through and all the stages have been applied, like I just showed in that in the example with the card opt example, that outgoing query is it's sort of a key value approach. So that incoming query would be the key, and the outgoing query would be the value. So the next time it's seen, that text tagger, if I can get back to that, it's a small look at it, but you can see the spell correction, the phrase boosting, and the synonym expansion, and then you see tail rewrites. So that's where it would pick that up. Even though they're actually listed out of order here for whatever reason, the tail rewrites are actually what's looked at first. And if it sees that tail query with that value, it's going to apply that first, and then it'll skip those other stages. So we're about at the bottom of the hour. I hope everybody's enjoyed the session and gotten something out of it. Some of the other questions that we haven't gotten to, we'll follow up on and email you some answers on that. And so thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining in. Hope you got something out of it. And talk to you next time. Thanks.